We still need a few more for quorum.
Okay, very good. Thanks, Tracy.
Uh-huh.
Are we still short, Tracy?
I need one more.
You haven't heard from anybody else not attending, correct?
No.
Okay.
Ted said he might be a little late joining.
Ted did.
Yeah.
Stephanie isn't on yet?
No, she said she'd be participating.
Check with them here real quick.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm late. I had technical difficulties.
Aha.
No problem.
Now we have quorum.
Very good. I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order Wednesday, April 7th at 11:33 a.m. And first order of business is to approve the agenda and entertain a motion.
Motion, Stephanie.
Second by Andoy.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. The agenda is approved. Next, we'll vote on the approval of the minutes and entertain a motion to approve the minutes if there are no changes.
I do have one.
Okay,
I noticed, I'm pretty sure I was there in March. I have notes for being there in March, but I was not on the attendee list.
well, we will correct that. We will correct that, Elizabeth. Are there any other additions or changes to the minutes? If not, I'd entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
Motion, Reva.
Is there a
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor will say aye.
Aye.
I
Opposed, same sign. Minutes are approved. Item 4 is going to be report and vote on 2025 STBG funding recommendations. And Zach, you're on.
Thank you. So the funding subcommittee met on March 31st to develop their recommendation for funding for federal fiscal year 2025 STBG funding. Just as a reminder, the target that we received from the Iowa DOT back on February 8th was $12.7 million. So that's how much the committee had to award out. And we had a requests over 39 million. So the committee had some pretty tough decisions to make. Next slide, please. So included in your agenda packet was a complete list of the funding subcommittee's recommendation for awards. We've got the awards on the screen here as well for your review. I won't read off each one, but for the system capacity category, 4 of the 6 projects that were submitted were recommended to receive funding. Under the major reconstruction and replacement category, we had a lot of projects submitted under this, a total of 11. 5 of the 11 projects under that category were recommended to receive funding. We only had 1 system optimization project submitted by the City of Des Moines. It was recommended to receive $500,000. Our 3 bridge projects that were submitted, all of them were recommended to receive their full funding request. And then finally, our transit project from DART received 1.3 million, and then the MPO's TMA program received the 95,000 that it has traditionally over the last 10 years or so. Next slide. This table on the screen shows you how the breakout is as far as percentages go. You might recall that when we developed our long-range plan, maybe 8 years ago now, the first version of Mobilizing Tomorrow, we developed some percentage categories that the committee wanted to see as targets for where we would try to make sure we were getting our funding. If you look at the minimum and maximum targets there, those were the ones that were set as part of the long-range plan process. And then on the far right side of your screen there, you can see the actual targets for how we award funding this year. And for the most part, we fell within those categories. You can see we awarded a little bit more funding to our system capacity projects than our maximum target is. That's basically because we had a lot of high dollar requests in that category. The other ones pretty much fall in line. The bridge program is a little bit under, but that's just based on the fact that we only got the 3 projects and we fully funded their requests. So we really couldn't get to that minimum target of 20% with those 3 projects. Otherwise, like I said, everything else was pretty much in line with where we want to see those targets. Next slide. And that was it. So this is the award recommendation from the funding subcommittee. It's before you for your approval. If you have any questions for me about the recommendation, I'd be happy to take those questions at this time.
Thanks, Zach. Any questions for Zach or comments anyone would like to make at this time?
I do, just one, and I apologize if this is going to belabor something that I'm the new one, so I'm going to ask some of the background questions. The scoring piece of this, is it the bigger number the better, the smaller number the better, like golf, or I didn't see a rhyme or reason in terms of how scoring's matched up with what was allocated.
Yeah, no, that's a question that we get a lot. And, one of the things that the funding subcommittee did discuss a little bit was kind of doing a review of our scoring system. We've updated this a number of times over the last few years, essentially trying to match up our project scoring with the goals in the long-range plan. The challenge with that has been that, the scoring system we developed basically is really good at telling you how many of the different goal areas and performance measures an individual project is addressing, but it doesn't necessarily give us a great idea of prioritization. And the example I'll give you is that in the long-range plan, maintaining our current existing system is one of the highest priorities. Unfortunately, a lot of the projects that are submitted under that category don't, they might be maintaining the roadway and bringing it back to good condition, but if they don't hit a lot of the other goal areas, they're not going to score very high. But it doesn't really necessarily mean that that project isn't an important project, because maintenance of the system is one of the major priorities in the long-range plan. So, we're going to spend the next few months kind of doing a review of that scoring system and trying to make sure that, the score is aligning a little bit better with what those priorities are in the plan. But it's a good question. It's a question that we, have gotten a number of times over the last couple of months. I hope it answered your question.
That's helpful, because when you look at a disparity from, for example, in one of the categories from 7 to 47, both of those were funded, but you have a 30, a 10, and a 19 that weren't. So like I said, I was trying to figure out what the consistency was in terms of the scoring.
I'll also mention that the score is really just one of the factors that the funding subcommittee considers. It's never been set up in such a way that projects have been awarded funding solely based off of score.
Perfect, thank you.
Any other comments or questions for Zach at this time? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve the recommendations.
Move.
Second by Andoy.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor will say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item 5. Again, this is a report and vote on the 2020 excess STBG program funding recommendations, and that is Zach again.
So about 2 years ago now, the committee had us develop a policy on how we would award excess funding. And just to give an example of what the excess funding is that each year we receive our targets from the DOT for STBG funding. And in that, they'll give us a final target for the, usually it's 4 years in the past from where we're awarding. So for example, this year, it was for federal fiscal year 2020 funding, and we got the final apportionment for that year. And when we reviewed that, we discovered that we had basically $500,000 in excess funding. So we had awarded $500,000 less than what that final number was from the DOT. So based on that and our policy that we set up a few years ago, we provided the funding subcommittee with a list of projects in the current TIP. And basically it was the last 3 years of the current TIP, and requested that they review those projects and provide a recommendation for how to award those excess funds. And the recommendation that the committee came up with was to award the money to the City of Des Moines Intelligent Transportation System project that's currently programmed in federal fiscal year 2023. So that's the recommendation that's before you from the funding subcommittee, to award that $500,000 to the City of Des Moines project. If you have any questions about the excess funding process or their recommendation, I'd be happy to take them at this time. Otherwise, this is before you for your approval.
Questions or comments for Zach? If not, I'd entertain a motion to approve the recommendation. Is there a second?
Second, this is Weaver.
Okay, thank you. All those in favor will say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item number 6 is a report and vote on 2025 STPG set aside and TAP program recommendations. Saroshi?
Yes, thank you. So the funding subcommittee also made a recommendation on the STBG set aside or TAP funding program. The target for the 2025 funding cycle was about 1.1 million, and 20% of that funding was for this cycle set aside specifically for Safe Routes to School projects, which is about $232,800. We received a total of 6 applications, and 2 of those were Safe Routes to School applications. The total ask was about $2.5 million. Next slide, please. In this table, you can see the various projects, and in the at the column at the very end, you can see the award amounts that have been recommended for each of the projects. I won't go into the specific numbers, award amounts for each of the projects, but you can kind of see the top four over there are general trail bike ped projects, and the city of Des Moines, Ankeny, Polk County, and Altoona received funding. And for the Safe Routes to School category, City of Norwalk and the City of Waukee received funding as well. So with that, if you have any questions about the awards or the projects, I'll be happy to answer at this time. Otherwise, we are seeking approval of the funding recommendation for the STBG set-aside TAP projects. Thank you.
Any questions or comments for Saroshi?
This is Stephanie. I do have a comment. I'm on the STBG funding committee, and at that time, one of the members asked about the Norwalk project, questioning why the property owners did not fund the sidewalk. And I didn't have I guessed at the answer. And I just wanted to confirm that for the record, that the answer was correct, that at the time these homes around this area were built, sidewalks were not a requirement. So we can't really go back to the property owners to suggest that the houses were mostly built in the late 1800s, early 1900s. It's the original part of Norwalk.
Saroshi, can you take that question, or you know the answer?
It wasn't a question, it was just clarifying the question that was brought up at the committee.
Okay. No, I understand. Thank you.
Okay.
I see what you're not checking to see what the outcome was. You
Right.
knew the outcome. Okay, got it. If not, I would, this is an action item. I would entertain a motion to approve the recommendation.
Walters.
Is there a second?
Second, Weaver.
Okay, thank you. All those in favor will say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item number 7 is report and vote on priority project list for the DC trip. And Zach, that is you.
Yes, each year the partnership requests that the MPO develop a list of priority transportation projects to submit for their trip to DC. And so we've been working on that list over the last few months. We've been working with member governments to update projects on the list and add new projects in. That list of projects was included in your agenda packet. I believe it begins on page 14. So those are the list of projects that the funding subcommittee reviewed at their meeting on the 31st. And they recommended that we take this list forward to this committee for approval. I would note that there was some discussion about this list. You know, it originally came about years ago due to earmarks, and the projects on this list were the ones that the region wanted to see go for earmarks from a transportation perspective. When earmarks went away, we continued to keep submitting this list to the partnership. However, it had a lot of less oversight on the list as it did in the past. And so one discussion that they had was that based on the fact that we might be seeing a return of a program that resembles earmarks, that in the future we might need to take a little bit deeper of a dive, look at this list a little more closely in the future. So that was just something I want to make you aware of, that they did discuss. And we're going to be talking about that earmark program here in just a few minutes on a separate item. Otherwise, they recommended that we just submit this list as it is to the partnership to include in their packet for DC. So if you have any questions about the priority project list, I'd be happy to take them at this time. Otherwise, it's before you for your approval.
Questions or comments for Zach at this time? If not, I'd entertain a motion to approve.
Move, Gare.
Second,
Second.
Reba.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor will say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item number 8, report and vote on draft public participation plan and language assistance plan, and that is Gunner.
Good morning. Thank you. We're coming back to you today with the public participation plan and language assistance plan. And these are these are some of our federally required documents. And these meet all the federal regulatory requirements such as Title VI, environmental justice, open records laws, etc. Some of the updates that we made to the public participation plan were a section on adaptations for the pandemic period, updated to reflect some current practices, notably some virtual tools. And also we reviewed our media list to make sure that we are reaching outlets with diverse audiences. As for the language assistance plan, some of the updates that we had made were to the environmental justice maps and data on languages spoken at home. One of the outcomes of that review is that we have added a few languages to our website where we offer translation services, including Polish, Russian, and Arabic. We did open this up for public comment and we held a public meeting. That meeting was held on March 24th. We did not have anyone in attendance. We did hear public feedback from a few different entities, though, or we did get a little bit of public feedback, though. One of which notably is that we needed to have a 45-day comment period. So the deadline that you are seeing on your screen now of April 15th is different from what we told you last month. We had initially thought that we'd keep this open until March 31st, but rather we found out that there was a federal regulation very specific to just the public participation plan that required a 45-day comment period. So we did extend that comment period for 15 days. The comments that we did receive to date came from a Des Moines resident, one MPO member government, as well as the Iowa DOT. Some of those highlights include that comment period that I mentioned. Also, that we might consider public-facing Zoom links rather than requiring the public to seek out those links. And then a few other suggestions, such as the utilization of online calendars, subscription options for notices, visualization techniques, and also to consider a diversity and inclusion roundtable. Today, before you were asking for approval with the, or approval contingent on revisions to update these feedback. And normally we would have had this updated for you and asked for your approval with updated documents in front of you. Given that we had to extend the notice period, this is the route that we're choosing to pursue. The technical committee last week did approve this contingent upon revision, and they asked that we share this with them prior to it going to policy committee next week. So with that, I'll take any questions or comments.
Questions or comments for Gunner at this time? If there are none, I would entertain a motion to approve this draft policy plan and language.
Move approval, this is Weaver.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded, and all those in favor will say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item number 9, report on salary and compensation review matrix, and that is Todd.
Thank you. As part of my review period, the committee had made a recommendation to look at doing a salary and review matrix for the full staff for future reviews. So I asked staff to pull together some information from other jurisdictions, other MPOs, and sort of compile a best of, so to speak, of what's going on. And so we've prepared that for your review and have a draft matrix and salary schedule. And next screen. So some of the agencies that we looked at, a couple of the MPOs, our neighbors to the west, Omaha, and then down at Kansas City, similar entities and scale for their MPO operations. We also looked at City of Ankeny, City of Des Moines, Polk County, and Urbandale. In your packet on page 18 and 19, is kind of the salary comparison table and the positions that we used for comparison. We try to match them up best based on the knowledge we have of the jobs and their classifications, and then kind of average that out for a table for the MPO to use. There, one more screen. So based on that, we have that salary comparisons table. We'll use that, which is on page 20 for the reviews coming up later in May or June to take effect in July. If approved, we'll bring it back to you next month. Salary matrix was developed using a sample that the city of Clive had. We'll use our kind of a evaluation score 1 to 5 for staff reviews on performance. The compensation will be based on a percentage of the maximum of the salary position, but also have a COLA factor that we'll also use based on the Midwest region's composite. I believe that's the last slide, but be happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Todd. I was on the committee that helped look at this, and I know Ted was too, and Ted's on this call. And I think this goes exactly to where we wanted to get, and I know Sarah and I think Ted, you provided a copy of what you were using in city government as well, and I just think this is good work, and this is a good step, I think, forward, and hopefully we can get these reviews on track and get them done in a timely manner as well for the future. As I think we've done well with staff. I think it's Todd that we've fallen behind on. So
yeah, staff's on target, so no problems.
Questions or comments for Todd on this?
Hey, Matt, Steve Garrett. Todd, that footnote 2 says that the salary schedule is going to be reviewed every 3 years. So help us understand the rhyme or reason to 3 years, and when it's reviewed, is there going to be a consultant? What information is going to be accessed?
We just took, we looked at several different examples. Some did it annually, some did it 5 years, some did in between. So we just sort of averaged it on the 3 year. We didn't know that doing it every year made sense. I don't know if we need to use a consultant. We would probably do it the same way, where we would reach out to the different entities and get their salary schedules and do a comparison by positions, unless someone wanted us to have a more formal process with a consultant. But
Yeah, I don't think consultant is necessary. I do think you'll find that you probably need to tweak it on occasion. I know we haven't. It's taken us a number of years to get it to where, we're happy with it, but I think it's a good start.
If there are no other questions, I guess we can move on to item number 10. Item 10 is the report and community project funding or earmarks. Zach, I think you're on for this.
Yes, this is the item that I had mentioned earlier when we were talking about the DC priority list. So the House Community Appropriations has developed this program, discretionary funding program, that they're calling community project funding, which is essentially a replacement for what used to be earmarks. And so they have recently, in the last few weeks, they've come out with more information for this. Representative Axney has called for projects and has requested that projects be submitted to her office by April 16th. The information that we received from her office was sent out to our members on March 29th. And then there is a call happening actually right now where there's more information being shared about this program. Dylan is currently attending that call, so he may have some more additional information to share with you following that meeting. If we do, we'll send that out through email. I would note there are some key aspects to this. It's, I would say, much more limited than what earmarks were in the past. Each member is going to be limited to submitting 10 projects on their list. And this is not just transportation projects. This will include any number of other kind of projects as well. So there is that to consider. Also, one of the requirements they have for the transportation side of things is that the projects need to be in the TIP or the state TIP. And they're kind of suggesting that, and this is again kind of a change over what earmarks were in the past, but what they're recommending is that communities submit projects that are on this smaller cost side that have wide community support. And I think the reason for that is that they have indicated that, you know, if you were to get $2 million out of this, it would probably be really rare, and that it's more likely that hot max awards will be more around the $1 million mark. So again, not necessarily a huge amount of funding for big, large scale projects. And I think that's why they're probably encouraging those kind of smaller cost projects with wide community support. So that's what we know right now about this program. Like I said, we might have some more information after Dylan gets off that call today. But if you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them at this time.
Any questions for Zach or comments? Well, earmarks are great. God bless America. Bring them back. It's always good news. So, Todd, I think you're going to update us on our economic development district update.
Yes, real quick. We did get all 7 counties letter of support to create the economic development district. Marion was the last county that signed their resolution recently. So those are all done. We're now proceeding into development of the CEDS, the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy Plan. And also we're forming, go ahead to the next slide, please. This is kind of the timeline we're on. So we're in the March-August timeframe, phase 2, creating the entity. So we've met all the criteria. We're determining kind of the membership and developing the CEDS. Go to the next slide. So we'll be forming a steering committee and conducting the SWOT analysis. That's part of the CEDS process. Next month, we'll have the goal of meeting with stakeholders and reviewing the CEDS, doing some project selection, and review the draft document through June and July, and finalize in August to submit the document to the Economic Development Administration. Go to the next one. Some of the things that we're responsible for the CEDS committee is obviously overseeing the development of the document, helping organize local engagement, providing feedback, doing the updates, forming the EDD, and acting as a sounding board. I think that'll take about a month. The committee will be made up of 5 representatives from each of the 7 eligible counties, about 35 maximum. We're looking to have some representation from public and private sides, and we'll work with the different entities in each of the counties to help fill that out. Want people who can help facilitate local engagement, and then stakeholders from each county will select their own representatives. This committee is separate from the board. That will be the board that governs the EDD, but this committee will help kind of set the framework for the CEDS and then forming the organization. So right now we're meeting with some key contacts in each of the counties to start that process to identify those 5 representatives from the steering committee, which will be selected from within each county. Then that will help to find some key practitioners in each county, and again, do that SWOT analysis for each county, and then pull that together into one document for all 7 counties and do a strategic analysis. Any questions or comments? It's a busy process, but we're making it through, and we'll have a lot of help from different entities.
Thanks for that update, Todd. Next item is our transload facility update. And I think Zach, you're going to take that.
Yes. So just wanted to give you a quick update on the transload facility. They wrapped up their site clearing in the last week of March. So they got all the trees and stuff and all the old junk and pieces of concrete and stuff that they need to move off the site done at the end of March. April and May, what they've got scheduled is doing a lot of grading, working on the site utilities, and then they're going to be prepping the pad for the warehouse. We did get news from them that we're expecting to see our first reimbursement request for build grant funds, probably somewhere around April 10th. So once we receive that, we're going to be working with the FRA to get that first reimbursement request in. We'll do a little bit more of a review process with them on the first request, and then once we all have a strong handle on how that process is going to work, we're expecting them to go smoothly in the future. We were also beginning to work on our next quarterly report, which is due to the FRA by the end of April. We had our monthly check-in meeting with the FRA this week on Monday, and that went well. Everything construction-wise is still on schedule, and they gave the FRA the update that I'm basically giving you now. Next slide, please. I would like to share a couple of pictures with you that Des Moines Industrial sent over to us. So this is a picture showing the site looking towards the east. You can see where they've cleared quite a bit of trees and different stuff around the tracks there. And then on the next slide, you can see that they're also beginning to do quite a bit of dirt work on the site. And these pictures, as of now, are a little over a week and a half old, I believe. And I was talking to the guys at Des Moines Industrial yesterday, and they noted that even since these pictures have been taken, a lot of stuff has happened on site. So exciting to see equipment on the ground doing work, and we're excited to start doing our reimbursements through the build grant. That's the update I have for. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Hey, Zach, is there a reason why, like, pros or con against taking some of these photos and putting them on like social media just to showcase what's happening and remind people about some of these projects that we're doing?
I don't see any reason why we couldn't share them to social media. I may check with the guys at Des Moines Industrial, but I don't think they would have any qualms about sharing them.
Generally, people are always, interested when they see piles of dirt moving, and so it might just build some engagement and also answer some questions about what the heck is happening on that side of the road. So
good idea.
Zach, remind us the estimated substantial completion date.
I believe that is towards the end of the fall, into September, end of October, somewhere in there.
Yeah. I think they want to have some operations going by the end of October.
Okay.
It's exciting to see, Zach. It's great to see the dirt finally moving. That's great.
It is. It's been 10 years in the coming.
Thanks for the update. That's exciting news, and I like the idea of getting it out there and sharing it with the public if we can. So item 13, the Purple Heart Highway update. We spent a week on a call yesterday afternoon.
Yeah, it was a long call. Go ahead to the next slide. So we did have the Iowa DOT task force meeting was held yesterday, as Matt mentioned. Had a good discussion. It was a long call, but we covered a lot of area. The DOT has asked for the MPO to complete an environmental document for the corridor and a design exceptions document also before a formal request can be made. So I'm working with the DOT and Federal Highway on what they're going to need in those documents. And then how we get moving forward with those as soon as possible. So we'll bring those back. There's also a traffic analysis as part of the design exceptions that will have to be done as well. They also presented a summary document on the corridor, which is basically a combination of all the information that we've previously shared, and we can send that out to everyone as well. And an update here and prior to the policy meeting. It's a nice little document that kind of shows where we're at in the process from the DOT's side of things. The DOT also asked to brainstorm additional ideas on how to deal with the slow moving vehicles. There is a concern about maintaining slow-moving vehicles on an interstate, primarily the farm equipment, but also DOT vehicles, though DOT vehicles are on the interstates currently. But the farm vehicles on that one segment of US 565, being below 40 miles an hour is a safety concern. So possible options for that. They shared a lot of different ideas at the meeting, from do nothing to building an alternate facility and various items in between, but nothing obviously has been decided on that. So we'll keep working on that. Probably have another meeting with that task force in a month or so. And we'll be bringing back to this group more information on those documents that we need to finish now. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Todd or comments from those that were on the call?
I just have a comment in that I think that probably through you, Todd, and MPO, but is executive committee overall looking at this project, we really need to press to get that timeline of when things should be done and hold Department of Transportation to it, because I can just see, oh yeah, we didn't get the bids yet for doing the report, and we'll get the report next month, and another project came up, and we'll be sitting here a year from now and they still will not have done a report. So I think we just really need to keep, I don't want to say pressure. We just need to keep focus on it from the DOT's perspective and constantly ask about this. And maybe it wouldn't be a bad idea as part of the monthly update policy committee that we ask Iowa DOT to just give a brief statement on their progress.
Sure, we can do that. And Andy's on the call, so I'll ask Andy to relay that information. On the environmental document, I think the DOT will, because it'll probably be a very, that's a built corridor. It'll be a very straightforward document. I'm guessing, Federal Highway will determine that, but I think the DOT is proposing to do that in-house. They might ask us to help pay for some of their staff time. The design exception and traffic analysis will have to probably come out of MPO funds. We can probably use HNTB since they've already been working on this corridor, did the previous studies, and get that moving sooner than later. But I'll bring that back to you with more information.
Okay.
Hey, Todd, the initial communication indicates some funding from the MPO. Have you guys discussed that potential funding and what sources of money that would come from?
My guess we would be looking at the reserve funds that we have, Steve, to fund these studies, because we haven't budgeted anything in our current budget for them.
Was this item discussed with the committee on the excess? Could we have used some of those excess funds for this?
Maybe is kind of the answer. No, we did not. We typically haven't used STBG funds for studies. We do have still the pretty healthy reserve, so that's an option. We have some money set aside for consultants. It probably won't be enough for all of what the DOT wants done. But we'll bring back a financial plan on how to address that to everyone.
Well, and maybe you run it through the finance committee that Mayor Andwig chairs now.
Sure, can do that.
If I recall from the discussion, the amounts we're talking about is somewhere in the neighborhood, probably 25 to 40,000 was I think some of the numbers they used yesterday.
That was for one of them. One of them's going to be more than that. Yeah, the traffic analysis one's going to be
Huge.
probably a couple 100,000 would be my guess.
Well,
Okay.
and this communication says the pavement marking, they're asking for 267,000 on top of that.
Yeah, that one is, that's a different ask, but yeah, that came out after the operational study was done, that the DOT wanted the MPO to pay for the changeover to interstate pavement markings and cost share. The DOT is paying part of it. The MPO would pay the 270, and then also to pay to close the gates that the DOT installed for maintenance purposes that they don't use.
This is Andy. I did hear, talk to Paul LaFleur on that and today, and he thought that those gates could, in that operational analysis, if we just, identify that those, those are Iowa DOT maintenance gates and they're going to be locked and, we'll have the keys. They think they might be okay with that.
Okay,
So there might be an option of not have to do any of that.
sure.
But, as we move to an interstate, there are, certain things out there that we have on the interstates for safety. One is the pavement markings. Another one is cable median barriers. So I think, the possibility for needing some of those could be there, especially when we get into the design exceptions where the medians aren't as wide as maybe they, interstate standards are. So, to help, keep those cars from going back and forth if they do get off the road and running into head on into other traffic, those median barriers have been very effective in improving safety. So that was, those are the things that, that we look at on our end because, we're going to be managing this thing for, we are now and we will be into the future. So we just want to make it safe as we can.
Yep, no, understand.
I-
I want it to be safe.
I think to Mayor Gear's point, it might be helpful if we just, maybe started kind of an Excel spreadsheet of what we're anticipating for
Yeah.
costs and at
Where the
least-
funds are coming from, yep.
yeah, and start looking for money and
Yeah.
in the seat cushions. All right. Next item on our agenda is water trails update, and we have Hannah with us today, and Todd, you're also going to present. So
Yeah, we'll walk through some things and then, if there's particular questions on the finance side, with Hannah Inman and Maggie McCullen are with us as well. And I believe Gabe Nelson is on in case there's some design questions. But I'll kick it off and we'll walk through a few things. And a couple flow charts as well, kind of to go through some of these processes that we're talking about. But staff's been busy with the team working on the water trails project, and a lot of that's our focus has been on the agreements and sub agreements and defining roles and responsibilities within those. Also, the change order process procedures, the DOT office, Deb Arp and Craig Markley in the planning office were interested in seeing that. And then an overview of the reimbursement process as well. Next slide. So the sub-agreements that we're working on, and we're working with various partners on all these, just some of them listed here, the MPO and the Iowa DOT will have a sub-agreement underneath the build grant agreement, which will be between the DOT, Federal Highway, and the MPO. Then the MPO and DOT will have one. The MPO, Central Iowa Water Trails in Polk County will have one. That's basically on how things are on the engineering side of things, construction engineering side of things during the construction phase. The MPO in Des Moines, the city of Des Moines, regarding how we access the property and get the easements we need during construction and those type of things. And then the MPO and Central Iowa Water Trails on the finance side, how the money is going to be deposited into an account for the MPO, and then how all that process works through on the reimbursement, money coming back into that account and so forth. We did provide the first agreement back to you as a draft between the Central Iowa Water Trails and Polk County. Sort of went through these already. Next slide. Roles and responsibilities, the DOTs, ensuring the MPO is following the terms and conditions of the build grant agreement itself, as well as any of the sub-agreements. They will review the reimbursement request submitted by the MPO first, then forward it on to Federal Highway to work on the reimbursement request, and then send back the reimbursements to the MPO once the money's transferred from Federal Highway to the DOT. Next slide. The MPO, we administer the project activities, dealing with cost, time, adhering to the contract requirements in the build, as well as with the contractor. maintains the familiarity with day-to-day project operations. That's where we turn to Polk County and their consultants to do that, and they report back to us on that, and makes decisions on change conditions or scope changes during the actual construction of the project. Next slide. Visits and review the project. We have to stay on top of the project, and then reviews the financial process, tracks transactions and documentations to make sure nothing's going wrong with the funding side of things. Next slide. We'll direct project staff. This is all part of being a build grant recipient, and all the documentation, making sure that their qualifications and on-job performance, all that good stuff. And then submitting the reimbursement request on a monthly basis to the DOT. There's a whole process for that as well. Polk County, as I mentioned, will help assist the MPO with day-to-day oversight of the construction management. Report to the MPO on those activities on the site. Assist the MPO in reviewing on invoices and pay items. Also help ensure that the materials are meeting the Buy America requirements, and doing the material certifications to the MPO that we have to report on the reimbursement requests. Similarly, on the Davis-Bacon requirements, doing the same thing. Next slide. If there is a change order on the project, they would help develop the change order in coordination with the contractor and present that to the MPO for approval. We'll have to work some details out on how the MPO approves those. They'll also maintain a copy of the records and provide copies of those records to the MPO. Complete the draft construction audit, provide that to the MPO for review, and then submit the final construction audit to the DOT staff on behalf of the MPO. These are all things that are outlined in those agreements. One of the responsibilities for the city of Des Moines, and we're still working through this, so there's a lot of discussion on how this will be done, but responsible for maintaining the completed facilities through the 20-year time period under the grant agreement. And again, we're working through that. Central Iowa Water Trails provide the local match for an account for the MPO to use during the construction of the project. Also open a line of credit to help with cash flow if needed. They'll be using Bankers Trust for that. And then provide the funds to maintain the project's in-water features. Central Iowa Trails is proposing to take care of all the in-water features, and then the city would handle all the landside features. Next slide. And then we'll kind of run through these flow charts. Gunnar, if you can flip over to that real quick. Just a second. There we go. So this first flow chart is kind of the overall flow chart for the build grant. Starting at the top, Federal Highway is the grantor of the agreement. And I can't read that. There you go. So that they give us the build grant agreement and that's between the Federal Highway DOT and the MPO. The DOT is considered the recipient, and then the MPO is the sub-recipient of the build grant. We did that so that we could use the DOT's bidding procedures. If we didn't, we'd have to develop our own bidding procedures, and for that to get approval at Federal Highway takes more time than we had to do this project. So we're the subrecipient, and then the MPO is the responsible in charge. And then we have kind of 4 areas underneath that: project financing, construction contract, construction management, and maintenance. The project financing, as I mentioned, is between the MPO and Central Iowa Water Trails. They'll provide the local match for the funds to go along with the build grant. MPO will hold the contract with the construction contractor, and there'll be some subs underneath that. Construction management, the MPO and Polk County will have an agreement for that. Polk County is likely to have a sub-agreement there using Snyder and Associates to help with the construction management activities. So they'll be involved through that process. And then a maintenance agreement with Des Moines. Again, this is what I was talking about. We're still working out details here about how that will work out with the city on the land side and in water features, but proposed to meet the build, and really it's a DOT requirement. It's not so much a build requirement, but a DOT requirement that the project be maintained for 20 years. Have the city do the land side, and Central Water Trail is responsible for the water side. Next chart, please. As I mentioned, there was some interest in how the construction change orders might happen. Snyder, as a construction management company, would develop the change order if something came up from the contractor. Polk County would get that information and submit that to the MPO for review and approval. I'm proposing that if it's under $1,000, that I could approve that and the project would move forward. If it's over that, and over 100,000 but less than $1 million, the MPO executive officers could approve that. And if it's over $1 million, that would come to the full committee for approval. Obviously, all these would be reported back to the full exec and full policy, but just to keep the project moving, these 3 ways of approving change orders would be used so we didn't have to get the full policy committee together each time to approve a change order. Any questions on that?
So Polk County is submitting the change orders and asking for approval, but wouldn't Central Iowa Water Trails want some kind of input on that, since they're the ones responsible for providing all the funds necessary to complete this project?
There would be, some coordination with them, but in the DOT and Federal Highways eyes, it's the MPO's call on these. But obviously, we'd want to make them aware and look at budget implications through this process.
Okay.
Okay, go on to the next one, please. The reimbursement request, DOT asked us to put this together. Construction engineer would develop the pay estimate for the work that's been completed. The MPO and the county would review the pay estimate, making sure everything was there in the submittals, the receipts, the Buy America, Davis Bacon, all those type of things. If it's correct, the MPO would approve it. If it's not, we would go back and work with the contractor and the construction engineers to revise the pay estimate and then start over again. Go ahead and slide down. So the MPO pays the item, pays the contractor for the work from the project account that would be set up with Central Iowa Water Trails. The contractor deposits that payment and the funds clear the MPO account. We get back a copy of the check that was endorsed. We prepare a build grant reimbursement and submit that to the DOT. The DOT reviews the request and decides whether they will approve the payment. That would include, as I mentioned, looking at the pay items, the invoices, receipts, the canceled check, etc. Assuming yes, then the Iowa DOT would send that request to Federal Highway, and Federal Highway would approve it and send the funds to the DOT. Concurrently, the DOT would, if they say yes, sends funds to the MPO. They kind of preload the payment to us while waiting for Federal Highway to pay them. And then we deposit those funds in the project account and the cycle starts over. That's an 80-20 reimbursement. So for every invoice we submit, we'll get about 80% back. Any questions on that process? It's really exciting stuff, I know.
I don't have a question on the process, but I have a question on the account. Is this the appropriate time to ask it?
Sure.
Okay, so I didn't read the draft agreement yet, the change. I'm sure there's more drafts coming.
Yeah.
So I think it was in the first one too, and I didn't realize it didn't make sense. It said that Central Iowa Water Trails is going to deposit matching funds into an account held by both the MPO. It doesn't say both. Who's the other both? Is the Central Iowa Water Trails also on that account?
Yeah, we're working through that. And the idea was that Central Iowa Water Trails would deposit money into the account, the MPO would pull out of the account. Who has exact ownership or who has the ability to do what, or still kind of reviewing with the DOT on how they'd like that set up. They had some questions about how that would operate. So, but the idea is just that Central Iowa Trails would deposit money into an account and the MPO would pull money out of the account. And then when we got the reimbursement, that money would go back into that same account. So we're still initially we thought both entities would be on the account, but DOT had a little concern with that. So we're just trying to work through those issues right now.
Okay, because Sarah's not on the call, correct?
No.
Okay, because I think she had a concern last time that if there was more than one entity on the account, if our auditor would if it would give him heartburn, if we needed to check with the auditor also about how this account is set up, see if he's okay with how that works. He or the auditor.
But yeah. And we haven't got that question answered yet, but I'll circle back with him.
Okay, thanks. Process looks great. Thank you for doing this flow chart. It's very helpful.
Yeah, no problem. We also had a meeting today with, I know, is there one more of these, Gunnar? Can't remember. I see flow charts in my sleep now. Nope, that was it. We also had a meeting earlier today with Central Iowa Water Trails on just how we would set up that account and how it would be funded. We would put in an initial deposit into the account so we can pay at least 2 or 3 invoices, expected invoices when we start construction, and start that reimbursement process where we could turn the money back around, and also have available to us a line of credit from Bankers Trust, as I mentioned. So if there was some large pay item that popped up, we could pull additional funds into it from that. So we've got those conversations underway with Central Iowa Water Trails. We met with Maggie and Chris Costa, who's the treasurer for that group at NAP, and a few others from the foundation as well. It's holding the money in an account. So right now. So I guess I'd be happy to answer any questions or other comments.
I just got one. In one of the emails that we got, there was a Excel spreadsheet attached to that shows inflows and outflows.
Yeah.
I see where the 25 million is coming in, but it's just a number plugged in there. I think that should have its own. I don't know what this spreadsheet, who is going to be looking at this spreadsheet, but it's not clear. In August, it starts with a 0 cash on hand and winds up at 24 million at the end of August, but it doesn't technically show the $25 million bill grant coming in on its own line. It seems to me like we ought to have a separate line there that shows activity on that to show what the balance of it is.
Yeah, we can play with that, Gary, and we're revising it anyway based on the conversation we had at 10. The build grant is a reimbursement grant, so we don't get that 25 million up front. It's pulled in over time of the life of the project, construction of the project, but we can highlight that in a different way. So it's a little more clear that that's the build grant money coming in.
Yeah, it just seems like it ought to show the flow of that cash a little better than just dumping it all in there at the beginning without much explanation to it.
Yeah, we can certainly take a look at that cash flow. We call it a cash flow worksheet, but we're going to revise it anyway. So
That was really good information. I guess my only comment would be on those change orders of up to $100,000.
Mhm.
I would think that, I mean, some of those could be significant enough that maybe those ought to at least go through the finance committee. I think you could get the 3 people on the phone pretty quickly. And maybe it's between 10 and 100 grand ought to go at least through the finance committee. Because what if you had, you know, 20, $90,000 ones? It starts adding up pretty quick.
Well, yeah, I think, if we had something like that, I'd want to talk with some other folks too. But yeah, we can look at that, Steve.
I have just a general question because I'm still a little fuzzy on how all this works. So the build grant was for the entire Water Trails project, right? Or was the build grant just specifically for the portion that's within the city of Des Moines boundaries?
It's for part of what's in the city of Des Moines. It's for the Scott Avenue Bridge, then Harriet Street, Birdland Marina, and Prospect Park. So it's for those 4 projects. That 25 million is being spread over those 4 projects.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you.
And then just to the reimbursement timeline, just to give you an idea of how long the process takes, from when the construction engineer submits the pay items to the MPO to when the funds are transmitted back to the MPO is approximately 41 days if everything goes right. I'm guessing the first time or two, there'll be some hiccups for whatever reason, just because it's new and because it's a Water Trails project, which they haven't done before. The DOT hasn't done before. But this is the timeline we've worked out with the DOT to this point. We've also set up electronic deposit with the DOT, so that saves time from getting a paper check, which tacks on at least another 10 days to this process. So once they get the go ahead, the DOT's Finance Bureau can push a button and shoot the money to us. So that saves a little effort and time. We've hit on some of these, but the local match, as I mentioned, by Central Iowa Water Trails, that spreadsheet that Gary was mentioning, we developed and was sent an email reminder. In that, it would have a $705 million in cash at the beginning. We're kind of reworking that to look at how the city of Des Moines deposit to Central Iowa Water Trails works with that, as well as the line of credit. So we'll be revising that to an extent. Depending on how the pay items work out, we may have to get a little bit of a bump towards the end of the construction project from Central Iowa Water Trails just to cover the project. But our best guess is we'll be okay, but there might be that need. And this isn't accurate, but it was just a way to do the cash flow, is that it assumed an equal payout each month. The reality is some months will have more than others as far as paying out. But for this exercise, we just divided the project cost equally across the construction period. Is there any other slide? So we'll work on finalizing those sub-agreements through the rest of this month. Probably bring back in May for review and hopefully June for approvals. We'll set up the project bank account. We'll work with Central Iowa Water Trails to, the local matching funds into the account, the line of credit, and then signing the build grant agreement between the DOT and Federal Highway before the obligation date this fall. No, I think that's it. Be happy to answer any questions. Long item today.
Questions for Todd at this time? Comments? Okay, hearing none, I think we'll move on to legislative update. Zach, what are they up to?
I can take this one.
Okay.
Since I'm back on here now. So thanks everyone. I guess I have 2 federal update items here. One you might have heard about last week. The Biden administration announced their proposal or plan for an infrastructure package. So it'd be a $2 trillion package that includes transportation, but also a lot of energy related things, school funding, just a whole bunch of different stuff, affordable housing and so forth. Within the transportation aspect of that, though, they're outlining about $620 billion. And you can see the breakdown of how that would be up there on the screen. I won't read through all the individual numbers and lines there for you. A lot of it's kind of the typical stuff you would see for upgrading infrastructure and so forth. But there are a couple new things that they are proposing. One of those would be 20 billion for road safety to really support Vision Zero plans and safe streets and so forth. It's something that we've talked about. It's been talked about nationally, but there's never really been a strong program for it. There's also 20 billion for equity and access. And so this gets into the environmental justice discussion, working on programs that would reconnect neighborhoods that were cut off by big federal investments in the past to try to, which were often typically through marginalized populations, Black communities and so forth, to really try to reconnect them. They also have 25 billion in there for large ambitious projects that don't really fall anyplace else because they're too big and complex. So there's a lot of stuff in there, and this is all on top of any sort of transportation reauthorization or appropriations or so forth. This is just a kind of a stimulus package like we saw back in 2008, 2009. So this obviously still needs to go through Congress. This is just the administration's proposal, but that's what they're proposing and will probably be the starting point for a lot of discussions. Any questions or anything on that? Before you go on to the next item there, one thing, just I know there was a discussion about earmarks earlier in the agenda, but I was just on a call with Representative Axne's office to talk about this. And I wanted to provide a little clarification because this was kind of new to me as well. There's actually two earmark process going on right now. There's one for the annual appropriations, and that's probably what we talked about earlier, where there are smaller projects. There's a limit of 10 per congressional member across all funding programs. And they said those are going to be about $1 million or less per project. But there's another one that was just announced on Monday, and this is for transportation reauthorization. So it's specifically for transportation. And these would be big projects. They said that the House T&I committee is anticipating that each congressional member will get between $15 to $20 million of basically allocation for projects. And so that's what they're working with. So these will be larger projects. There's no limit, like the other one, there's no limit on how many projects each congressional member can put forward. Axne's office said they will put all the requests forward to that committee. There's just no guarantee they would all make it in, and their office is probably going to have to prioritize somewhat, but they did say they'd submit everything onto them. And the application deadline for that is April 19th. So it just got announced. It's happening real quickly. There's still some questions that they're trying to figure out, but we will get information out to the communities as soon as we can and make that clarification that there's two processes going on and make sure everybody's pretty comfortable with that. The one thing with this new program too is they said they really want all the projects to already be in the TIP or the STIP. So anything that's in our TIP would automatically be in the STIP. That'll just speed things along. It'll show public support. It'll check a lot of boxes of what they're looking for. There's a mechanism to do it if it's outside of that too. It just requires more documentation. So if at all possible, we try to stick with just the TIP projects. I think that's the main update on that. I guess if there's any questions or comments on how to handle that or any other information you want to hear that we can work with their office about, we'd be happy to do that.
Thanks, Dylan. Any questions for Dylan? If not, we'll move on to MPO certification review update. And I think you were going to handle that, Todd?
Yeah, real quick, we had a couple state updates on the legislative side.
Yeah, real quick, just on these, nothing too new from this. Just a couple bills that we had been watching dropped off that didn't make it through the last funnel. Other ones are still alive. Nothing of too much consequence from what we've discussed before. So the personal delivery devices one is still alive, and then the definition of an e-bike bill is still out there too.
Okay, go ahead to the next slide. So the MPO is up for its quadrennial review with Federal Highway and FTA. We do this process, like I say, every 4 years. We last did it in April of 2017. So they, FTA and FHWA reached out to us a month or so ago to get this scheduled. We'll be meeting with them the 22nd through the 28th virtually. It's all by Zoom or whatever they're using. I can't remember. The final session of the preliminary hearing findings, excuse me, will be on the 28th from 2 to 3 p.m. We'll send you the link for that should any of you wish to attend to hear what their preliminary findings are. Expect a pretty smooth process as in the past, but we'll let you know on that. But again, you're welcome to attend any of the sessions, but probably the one of most interest for everyone will be the preliminary findings, and we'll send that link out. Happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Todd. Number 17, permanent trail counter program update, Saroshi.
Yes, so I wanted to provide you all an update to the MPO's permanent trail counter program. So you all might recall the MPO has budgeted some funding for purchase of permanent trail counters. So I wanted to share with you a little bit more information on the counters themselves and the benefit that they provide, as well as kind of the implementation and installation plan that we are looking at moving forward. If we could move to the next slide, please. So the counters that we're looking at right now are called multi-counters. They are able to detect both pedestrians and cyclists. And really, as the name indicates, they're permanent counters, so they provide regular, consistent counts throughout the year, 24/7. So it's very advantageous for communities to be able to kind of figure out trends in their usage, whether it's by day, by week, month, what have you. The other great advantage with these counters are that they are able to provide or transmit the data remotely into our account. So staff does not need to go out in the field every single time, round up the counters, bring it back to the office, download them as we have been doing in the past. We are able to get up-to-date counts every single day. So they are updated into or transmitted into our account remotely every single day. That's another way to detect very quickly if there's anything wrong with the counter, because we get the updates every single day. And if we notice anything strange, then we know there's something wrong, and we can go out in the field immediately and find out if there's anything going on with the counters. And here in the picture, you can kind of see what they look like. So they look like a post that goes on the side of the trail. So they blend very well. They kind of look like a trail marker or a sign, if you will. So they blend very well rather than a box or something sitting out on the side of the trail that tends to attract unnecessary attention sometimes and leads to vandalism and theft and that kind of thing. Also you can see on the pavement in the picture below, there's like a little diamond shape. So that's where the sensor for the bicyclist goes into the pavement and is generally not very visible unless you are just specifically looking down into the pavement. You don't even notice that it's actually there. It does have a pretty good battery life of about 2 years, which is much longer than what we have for our temporary counters. They work in all weather conditions, so snow, rain, and that kind of thing. It'll be still detecting the counts. It works for paved and unpaved trails, although right now we're just looking at paved trails. And one of the other big advantages to this is that it's able to count larger groups. The counters that we have been using right now, they tend to undercount a little bit, because when you have larger groups of people on bicycles or walking together as a family, the counter will typically detect just one person, whereas it could be a group of 5 or 6 people. So this counter is able to provide a much accurate count when people tend to be in larger groups. So those are, to summarize, some of the advantages that we're looking at with these permanent counters. Next slide, please. And so with that in mind, we are starting to develop a implementation or installation plan, if you will. And I wanted to give you an update on that. So right now, our focus is on level 1 regional trail corridors. And you can see here in the map, this shows the brown lines indicate our regional trails. And the layout of the trails in our region is kind of a hub and spoke system. So the spokes are essentially the 8 trail corridors that radiate out from the central hub, which is the Des Moines area. And then they kind of go in every direction and cover numerous communities, cities, counties, all across the region. So when we started working on developing a plan for our permanent counters, what we anticipate as a bare minimum is to be able to install at least 1 counter in each of these 8 trail corridors, regional trail corridors. And then at that point, once we have done that, we have a basic framework in place, and then we can think about expanding or adding more or adding some to connected trails and that kind of thing. So right now we have funding for 3 counters. And then we would be looking at 5 additional counters in the future. So we're following kind of a phased installation plan. And we don't have, what we need to determine right now is the specific location where the counter needs to go on these trail corridors. As you can imagine, these corridors are fairly long, and there are various locations where they could be installed. And so we are working with our member communities. This is where we need their help to identify locations, potential locations where the counters can go in. And as we start looking at locations, we're using certain criteria to identify those locations, and some of those criteria are historic usage. So we want the counters to be where there's good usage, and so we get good data. And then quality of the site, of course, is important. We don't want to install a counter in a spot that's prone to frequent or consistent flooding and that kind of thing, to minimize damage to the counter. And then, of course, we're giving importance to local priority. The local communities know where they have a need to get that kind of data, and so we are relying on their knowledge of that. So that's what I have been working on right now. And as I mentioned, this is an incremental process. So we're looking at the kind of the first quadrant, if you will, which is sort of the northeast quadrant of the region, and includes some of our highly used regional trails, such as the High Trestle Trail, the Chautauqua Valley Trail, and the Gailey Wilson Trail. So we are working with the communities right now and identifying locations. And once these are installed, and of course, as we start looking at funding and purchasing more counters, we'll be moving on to the sort of the northwest quadrant, where we have the Raccoon River Valley Trail, the Walnut Creek Trail, and the Neil Smith Trail, and finally the kind of the southern section, which has the 2 big ones, the Great Western Trail and the Somerset / Carl Voss Carlisle Trail. So in a nutshell, that's kind of our implementation / installation plan. As we figure out more of the details and we start working forward with the other additional counters and other locations, we'll be happy to come back and provide you more updates. But this is what I have right now. If you have any questions about this, I'll be very happy to address them at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? If not, we'll move on to US 169 interchange. Zach?
Yes, just wanted to update you real quick to let you know that we received a letter from the Iowa DOT concerning their plans to create a preservation zone around the US 169 interchange. So within that letter, they provided a link to a public comment, online public comment forum, and then they're collecting public comment through, I believe, May 17th. And I don't know, Andy, do you have any comments you want to make on this project?
Sure. This is actually over in District 4. They're handling this project, but it's basically, we're on the fringes of the metro areas where we feel that you know, in the future, not very far away, you know, that there might be potential to, you know, need to upgrade the interchange there or provide more lanes. Likely not. We just redid or are working on the Raccoon River bridges there. So we purchased right away there. But, you know, at the interchanges in these rural areas, we're seeing a lot, you know, development pressure and things, as you would imagine. So when we look at the potential to need those, these corridor preservation zones allow us to kind of review what's going on and, you know, as far as what's developing there. I think the northwest quadrant here, I think there was a salvage yard or something there, and it looks like in the air photo here that it might not be there anymore. That was provided in the agenda, but so, you know, as those things change, it looks like, you know, there might be potential for something to go in there. We just want to make sure that we're accommodated if we need to make interchange, you know, changes out there and need additional property. Because if we don't, then, you know, then costs get a lot higher, you know, if we have to, you know, make a tight diamond interchange or something and do a lot of retaining walls and things like that. That just, you know, increases the project. You know, for instance, up in Waterloo, Cedar Falls area, we had a highway go through, commercial development went, Highway 58 goes through, commercial development went, you know, all went on all quadrants. So they ended up having to buy a few out and then, you know, do a real tight diamond. And actually, I think they did a single point urban interchange and took the roadway under. So it was pretty substantial. When, you know, when we built that, we should have, you know, got this corridor preservation on those, and then we could have had kind of a normal diamond interchange. So this is a little different, as you know, it's not creating a new interchange, but if we need to make improvements, we just want to know what's going to be going, and so we can help, you know, help them develop in a way that, you know, would be less impactful to future development here. So if you have any questions, you know, on this process or where we've done it before, you just let me know. I know that east of the Raccoon River over to, I think all the way to Grand Prairie Parkway, we have something in place as well over there. Something very similar. I think that took place 2016, 18, something like that.
Thanks, Andy. Item number 19 would be upcoming events, and I think Gunnar, are you going to handle that?
I'd be happy to.
Okay.
Just a few events to make you aware of. You can still catch the last day of the Iowa Water Conference 2021 if you like. All the links to the events I'll mention here are in your agenda packet. So if you miss something I say, just see your agenda packet. Also tomorrow evening is the Pulitzer Prize winning journalist and Iowa native Nicole Hannah-Jones. You might know her from the 1619 project that has gained wide notoriety and interest, including in the Metro. That lecture is coming up tomorrow night. Register online before you show up, please. Also coming up through the Iowa State University Institute for Driving is the Distracted Driving Awareness Campaign. Finally, the Beyond the Bus Symposium is coming up again this month, and the theme this go round is Inclusion Matters. Again, links are in your packets. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them at this time.
Thanks, Gunnar. Finally, we need to vote on the approval of the policy committee agenda. I'd entertain a motion to do that.
So moved.
Yeah, Walters.
Okay, moved and seconded. All those in favor will say aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. The item is approved. Any other non-action items of interest to the committee that we need at this time?
I have one quick one. Matt, Joe had emailed during the meeting that he was hopeful that the exec and possibly policy could meet, if not in person, at least have the option for some members to in person do a hybrid type meeting in May. So his proposal is to offer that option for exec in May, and we'll move forward from there on how we move forward with in-person meetings. But offer the hybrid version next month. So I'll put
Okay.
that out there. And then if anyone wants to let me know how they're doing about that, they can email me.
Okay, we'll notice the committee and that will be great. The next meeting will be May 12th, and appreciate everybody hanging in here with us for this extra long agenda. And with that, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Can you second?
Second, sorry.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, thanks.
Thanks.